What are the most powerful branches of the U.S. government? Let's think about that real quick here. Well, what are the most powerful acts of the federal government? People would like to say judicial review or something like that, but no. It was, if you read Article 3, it was never given the level of power that it has, so that it supposedly has. So, the Supreme Court is installed by way of nomination by the president, which is elected by all 50 states by way of their electoral college system. And so the president has that one position people like to talk about that is elected by all 50 states. Okay, cool. That's great. That's interesting. What kind of power does he have? He has the power to veto a bill that's passed by Congress. And if Congress simply comes up with a 2/3 majority to override his veto, then they override it anyhow. So I don't think he's the most powerful. He has zero power regarding the amendment process. He does have the power to propose treaties, but he still has to go through the Senate, and treaties have less power than those powers enumerated for the sake of writing laws. They need to stick strictly to things appropriate for treaties. You could say that the Congress, then, that seems to be that they're the most powerful federal branch because they actually have the power to write laws. Plus, they have the power to propose amendments, as long as 2/3 of them want to propose it. But in order to get that amendment approved, it has to go through 75% of state legislatures. So it has to go through state legislatures. So, in other words, state legislatures are really kind of another branch of the government, but even more so than a branch. They're another portion of the government. That's something even bigger than being a branch, so if you ask me. So really, unless you want to count the fact that the people are involved in electing senators, involved in electing representatives, involved in electing the president, who then nominates the Supreme Court, and they're also involved in voting for their own state legislature. So obviously the people is the most important branch of the government. But other than that, it's the state legislatures. The state legislatures are the closest to the people. For the Constitution to be amended, it has to go through 75% of the state legislatures. To change the meaning of the Constitution, to have 5 out of 9 justices be able to say something that becomes legally binding on everybody else's oath of office and becomes, for all intents and purposes, part of the Constitution, that line isn't in Article 3 of the Constitution. It's in Article 5. Article 5 is the amendment process article. And for all intents and purposes, amendments become part of the Constitution, not Supreme Court decisions. As a matter of fact, Supreme Court decisions are only applied to cases. Read Article 3. So the obvious most powerful branch of the government, or the most powerful even portion, I'd rather say, is the states, the state legislatures specifically, because the state legislatures are the closest to the actual sovereign, and the actual sovereign is we the people. If you look at the original Constitution through the 10 Amendments, it is bookended by the preamble, which says we the people, first line, and then ends with the 9th and 10th Amendment. Ninth Amendment saying that just because we've enumerated certain powers to the federal government doesn't mean we don't reserve the rest of them to ourselves. And then the 10th Amendment says those powers not enumerated to the federal government, or not reserved to the federal government nor prohibited to the states, are reserved to the states or the people. And that's an important thing to remember. So really, to treat judicial review like it's legally binding on other people's oaths is silly. And if you remember the same church as I am, you think, oh, we've got continuing revelation. Look, well, we've got continuing revelation through the prophet, who's the one that's the closest to the sovereign. The closest to the sovereign is the prophet. He speaks the most directly, like Joseph Smith did with Jesus Christ himself, right? And so the closest to the sovereign is the prophet when it comes to church matters. The closest to the sovereign is the state legislatures when it comes to United States government matters. And that's the way the Constitution makes it quite clear in Article 5. To make the biggest, most powerful changes to everything, you have to go through 75% of the state legislatures. Have to. Period. State legislatures can initiate the process themselves, by the way. They don't have to wait for the federal Congress to do it. And then once they initiate it, it's not optional for Congress to participate. So again, the judicial branch is literally the furthest from the sovereign, we the people. They are not the ones to be receiving revelation for how to modify suddenly the Constitution. So if you're a member of my church, don't get confused about how significant the judicial branch is. They're not that significant. It's like basically taking somebody who's in charge of the stake high council and equating them with being the prophet. It doesn't work. Okay, they are literally the furthest from the sovereign in the chain of command. They're important, yes, they're just the furthest away. So 75% of state legislatures in order to actually change something in the Constitution versus 5 out of 9 judges. By the way, there's 50 states, so basic math, you guys. That's one person per 10 states. It's bad math. Versus look up the number of state legislatures that there are on average per state, and now imagine 51% out of 75% of those states. That's a much bigger number, okay? Who's the real closest, biggest, most powerful branch or portion of the government? It's the state legislatures, not the federal Congress. Federal Congress is the second most powerful, if you ask me. President, the third most powerful. Judicial branch, the weakest. And that's the way the founders saw it back in the old days. It's just changed in recent years. Somehow we've got this idea that we need somebody to be the final arbiter of the meaning of the Constitution, which doesn't even make sense. Why have people take an oath to a written Constitution if you're just going to have them actually follow whatever the Supreme Court tells them to do, and tell them that if they don't follow it, they're going to get in trouble as though they didn't follow the Constitution, when maybe what they did was actually more consistent with the Constitution. So, all right, thanks for listening, you guys.